Hello to YouTube. I got a quick video here, or actually it might be a little bit long of a video. I'm going to try and improve the spring back tension on my 959 Ducati. I think a lot of people might notice that the throttle has a lot of tension on it. Really hurts your wrist when you're riding, and it's pretty annoying. So I took the throttle off. That's all pretty simple stuff. And this right here is the ride-by-wire unit, and it takes a little bit of effort to get to. It does have these weird screws in it that have the three-pronged design on them. I was able to get that off using just a flat blade screwdriver. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off here and then show what's underneath there and what has to be done to improve on this. I have already tried this a couple of times with the spring, heating it and trying to detension it a little bit, but that has failed. So my next step is I'm going to build my own spring out of stainless steel TIG welding rod, and we'll see if that works. So the next video you'll see will be this removed. So I'm going to take these 4 screws out here, remove this panel here, remove this. The spring will be in there, and then the actual position sensor will be sitting here. Keep in mind, if you do this position sensor is pretty sensitive to it's where it sits in how it's clocked. So if it's clocked wrong and you start your bike, you can get some pretty high revs if it's not clocked right. So be very careful with that as you do this process. So we'll get started on taking this apart. Okay, so I got that metal cover off. I just want to show a video of the position of that sensor, the TPS sensor, or the throttle position sensor. And that's about where it sits on this bike. I think I might have it off by a tooth. And when I open this up, you'll see why it's difficult to keep it under control. So it just kind of snaps out. So what I recommend is looking at it the best that you can, keeping in mind what position it's supposed to be in. And if you started the bike, you can move this sensor to see when the RPMs come up, and it's very sensitive. A small amount makes a big difference. So be sure to be ready to shut the bike off right away if it seems to rev high. But as it's running, you can sit here and just move this just a little bit, and it will add the revs. And this one starts adding, or open up the throttle bodies at about that position, maybe a little bit more. So when I'm done putting it together, I make sure that it's in this position here. Also keep in mind, if you knock it backwards, it causes the revs to go up also. So be very careful of that, because it won't spring back as well going backwards. So that's what the inside of the ride-by-wire unit looks on the throttle side. The spring looks like it's stainless steel. You can tell this one's deformed quite a bit. I've messed with it quite a bit, put a lot of heat on it, and unwound it and wound it back up, trying to see if I can make it better. And as I said earlier, I'm just not able to do so. But this is approximately the original clocking for this spring. So you'll see this here goes in the throttle handle itself. This is what gets held in the sensor, or in the body of the throttle handle. So it sits just like this. So that sits in that groove there. And then this here will sit in this spot here. On the other side of that, there's a hole there. So that's how the spring works. So what I'm going to do is measure the width, the stack height of this spring here. And I'm going to make my own spring out of stainless steel. It's a little bit thinner, quite a bit thinner diameter of wire, and hopefully it'll be much easier to twist the throttle, but still spring back and still be safe. I'm going to set the clocking up in the same exact fashion as this. So I'm going to start by measuring the diameter of this that the spring needs to sit in. Grab a socket or some other piping or tube or something, and just wind the wire around that. And I'm going to wind it until I hit that thickness for the total width of that spring. So that's what we're going to do next. We'll see how it goes. So the inside diameter of the spring cannot be any less than 1.06 inches. The outside diameter of the spring cannot be any more than 1.47 inches. So I'm going to start with a socket that is approximately 1 inch diameter, maybe a little bit less, because I know that the spring is going to expand when I'm done wrapping it. So that's what I'm going to start with and see how it works out. The spring width is about 1/2 inch, so that's what I'm going to shoot for when I do my new spring. So if we go under that, you run the risk of, if you go under 1/2 inch, you run the risk of these sliding out, and so we want to make sure we get the right thickness on that. And so about 1/2 inch is what we're going to shoot for. Okay, so we're still working on the throttle spring for the ride-by-wire system, and I've made quite a few different designs to try and find the one that's just right for the torque that's needed to turn the throttle. So currently I've got this one here, which is the original one that I've heated up and deformed a little bit, and so I mean it still works fine, but it takes a lot of effort to twist it. So I've used this as a template to make some other ones here. So I have this one here, which works really well. The clock on it is a little bit different from the original one. So the original one sits inside the ride-by-wire unit like this, and then this point actually sits over here or around here and then is wound up for the throttle. So this one I had to put this far back to get enough tension on it to make it work well. The one that's in here now works fairly well, but it's not applying enough torque to get it to return properly, because that of course is number one important there. It has to be able to return right. So right now it's nice and it's easy on the fingers to turn, but when you let it go, it just doesn't come back all the way. And so that's not going to be good enough. So this one here is made from the same material as this one, which is, I believe it's a 16th stainless steel, but it just doesn't have enough strength on it to bring it back. So what I'm going to try to do next is build a happy medium between these two. And so what I'll demonstrate is how the other one springs back really well. As a side note, for anyone that's doing this, I would recommend putting a little dab of silicone here and a little dab of silicone here, and then that helps with that loose feeling that you have in the throttle on 959s. So it's still a little loose, but not as bad. It's much more positive. I know you can buy a plastic kit that puts plastic pieces over these ends here that suck up that slack also, but it's like $30, and a dab of silicone will fix it also. All you're doing is looking to get rid of the slack. It's important to make sure that you put the silicone on the non-drive side. So as I turn it this way, you want to make sure the silicone is on this side, not this side. That way this side has a solid contact. So that's a side note there. That worked pretty well. So we'll remove this here, and we'll put in that other spring to show how well it springs back. And I've been doing these tests without the actual sensor in place, because the sensor kind of gets in the way and I don't want to drop it and ruin it, so I pulled that gear off of it. So I'm going to sew the clocking difference here. So this one here is about what the factory one was clocked at, but it's obviously a thinner wire. so it doesn't spring back well enough. This is the factory one. You can see the wire's thicker, but the clocking is about the same. So this one's, it is a little bit tighter on the clocking, but not enough. This one is the one I'm going to put in next, and you'll see that it works really well. So this is where the handle goes into, and so it's going to spin around this way and then sit about like that. So it's clocked about 360 degrees, almost a full circle. So you'll see the difference there. So I'm going to go and install this one to show how well it springs back. So 2 screws will be enough to demonstrate this. So it's a lot easier to roll the throttle on with just your fingers, and that's what I was looking for. So it's still very firm and safe, but it's easier to hold just with some pressure, and it springs back nicely. So that's pretty much exactly what I'm looking for. But I'm trying to demonstrate that I can repeat the process. So I'm going to try and duplicate this spring that I just made and go from there. So, but it's much nicer. You can actually roll into the throttle just with holding your fingers, so your thumb is relaxed. So when you're in a tuck, your hands relax like so. And then when you want to roll forward into the brake, it's easy to just let it go and grab onto the brakes. So. Yeah, so that's the next step. We'll make the next, try and repeat that part. Okay, we're going to try and reproduce these. I'm just going to show you these one more time for comparison here. The one that has worked the best so far is this one here. The way it sits inside the handle, it sits like this. This one sits like so. And so they're really only 90 degrees out from each other, so it's actually pretty close. So what I'm going to try to do is reproduce this one and see if I can do it in a tighter form just to make it look nicer. So I'll show you some iterations that I've done. So I made this one here. This is just out of 3/32, just normal steel. Oops, this one here. Just mild steel. So this is that one there, and that, I gotta tell you, that one was way too stiff. It's a cool spring, but it's way too stiff. And then I went and I purchased some 3/32 stainless steel to try that one out, and that one was too stiff also. Not as stiff as the mild steel, but stiffer than what the stock one was. And the diameter of the tube, I'm sorry, the diameter of the factory one, the factory spring, is 0.078, and the diameter of the stainless steel rod that I bought was 0.093, so it was just stiffer. the diameter of the rod we are using is 0.063, and so that's why it works so much better for the throttle. So what I have here is a socket. The diameter of the socket is 1.17 inches. It's just a 7/8 socket, so it doesn't really matter. Just it's a general right diameter for what we're doing. So we're going to grab another stick. I'll show you some other. So this is how many times I've done this to try and make this right. So the first few times I did like a 5/8 socket, and it just ended up being too tight even after it relaxed, after I spun that around. A little bit larger socket on this one, and it was the same scenario. It was just too tight. Good design, it was going to work well, but just too tight. And then this one here just didn't work well because of the clocking. So it would have been set up to where you'd have to wind it that much more to make this one work, so it didn't work well either. So those are the iterations that I've done so far. This was a stainless steel one here also, and it was super stiff. It just didn't work right. So the two that I like the most so far are these two, and I'm going to try and reproduce this one, a little bit tighter coil, see what we can do. So we're going to grab the 1/16 diameter stainless steel TIG welding rod. So that's what that is. We're going to put a 90-degree bend on the very end of it, and I'm going to try to not use the spot where it's flat, where they stamp it, so we don't have a weak spot in the spring. And so we're going to bend it like so, just 90 degrees, and then we set it into the vise like that, and then we just wind it up. Try to push it down, keep it tight as you're doing it. Obviously you got to pull on it pretty hard. And we're going to wind it all the way so that I can choose where I put the next bend on it. I'm going to push it back down. Now if I let this go right now, it will unwind quite a bit. So I don't want to do that yet. So this is pretty close to the diameter that I want to use. So I'll show you how much that unwinds by letting go of it here. So you can see it opens up quite a bit, and this is what I want. It's a little bit tighter here. So it's not bad, but it's still too loose. It won't fit in that plastic very well. So the way we fix that is by winding totally, then we vice grip it, and then we hit it with the torch, and then let it cool off. So we'll rewind it. Make sure it's nice and tight. Clamp it down just like so, and just take a propane torch here. You want to heat it up pretty good so that it kind of changes color, and that's going to help it hold its form a little bit better. Try to be a little bit even on the heat. And I can see it's turning a little bit of a gold color, so that's how I know it's actually starting to get warm. I don't necessarily want it to get red hot. I don't think it needs to be red hot to make this work. That will probably be just fine. I'm going to make sure that's not too hot. I'm going to give it another tug here. Still very tight, didn't loosen up at all. Clamp that back down. You don't want to cool this off with water. It'll cause it to get too hard, and your chances of it breaking when you're riding the bike will increase. So don't use water to cool that down. I use a little bit of air. And I'm just feeling the back side to see if it's still blowing heat off it. Then I know I can touch it after it's not blowing heat anymore. Still pretty hot. Okay, now we'll release this and should be good to go. I'm going to let it release kind of slowly here. And we'll see what kind of a spring we ended up with. All right. That turned out pretty good. So, yeah, I like how it turned out. It's nice here, it's solid and straight all the way through, where some of these are a little bit crooked. This one's pretty good. But so this is pretty good. I like it. We're gonna straighten this out a little bit because this is the part that goes into the throttle handle, and I noticed that I do have to put a little bit of an angle on this way so that it has good bite. So we're going to do that too. And so what I'll do is I'll just put a little bit of a bend on it. Like so. Maybe a little bit more than that. Okay, just a little bit of a bend so it just is more positive contact. If it's bent, if it's leaning the other way, it'll kind of want to slip out of it because it is thinner wire. We certainly don't want that to slip on the throttle. Now we know that this is the one that has worked the best. You can see I put the angle on that for the throttle, so I know which one I'm working with. And so I know that if I put it here, this bend here, it might be a little bit too tight. I know that if I put the bend So I should be able to put the bend that I want right on this point here. Instead of down here, I'm going to put it here. And that'll make it so that the throttle will grab at this point to bring this around, rather than at this point to bring it around, which was a little snug. This right here was too loose. So this should be a happy medium between those two options. So means that we're going to put that bend right here. Which should make a big difference. Let's see what we get with that. It's easy as that to bend it. Let me cut it. And let's double check my thought process here. So to recap, this one here was a little too snug. And so I made it so that the engagement is going to be down by, I don't know, 30 degrees, 45 degrees-ish, not quite 90. This one here was not tight enough. And so I'm backed off from that one there. So we'll see how this one works out. All right, we're back at the bike. So we're going to install this. It's going to sit just like that. I'm going to put this on here. This is what the actual handle engages or connects to. Spin that around. So I got to put a little bit more of a turn on this one to make it engage better. We're going to bend it just a little bit more. I'm also going to open this up just a tad. And that will help it engage better when I put it together. Once I put it together, it sits like this, but as you're putting it together, it wants to move around because of how this engages like that. And you're not pushing it all the way into the bike. So we'll spin that around, just like that. Okay, we'll test it out here. So we got the handle, put it in there, gauges nicely, it's easy to use. It's a good happy medium between the last one that I had. So it seems to work well. It's not popping out or anything. Works good, easy on the fingers. So cool, yeah, I can reproduce that spring. Yeah, it works. works good. It's easy to, you can put your weight on it, your hand will turn it, and I like that. So it still has plenty of snap back though. Nothing's holding that back. So anyways, thanks for watching. I'm going to finish putting this together. I'll probably put that on here also. Please look at my other videos, and please subscribe to my channel too. I appreciate that if you can. And if you decide to make this on your own, I hope it works out for you. I hope those measurements help out, and the checks of that and the heat make a difference. But this is going to be great. It's going to be so much nicer to ride this thing and not have to death grip this thing all the time holding on to it because it wants to snap out of your hands. So it's just going to be great to ride. And to add, I did see a fella who did something similar with stainless steel rod, and he had similar outcome with it working well, and he put 2,000 miles on his bikes and it never broke. He never had any troubles with it. So I suspect it's going to work well without any issues of it breaking. So that's obviously the biggest concern that people have. So if you do, just beware that, you know, you can always roll your throttle back off. If for some reason it breaks, sticks, or whatever happens, you can always roll it off. So don't panic if that happens. But I think this will work out well. So good luck to anyone that tries it. And like I said, I'll end this off with me putting it back together. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put this together. Again, I'm going with the spring that has a little bit less tension on it, and we'll put it all together and test it, make sure it's good to go. But I find it's easier to put it in this part together first, and then slide it on, then clock it here, and then you're turning it around all the way to that point there. You got to keep pressure on it so that spring doesn't pop out of that hole. Keep pressure on it like that. Then you're taking your gear. This is what controls the throttle position sensor. This is a magnet that controls the sensor, which is on this side. And you have to line up that spring there into that little hole. And it's hard to see, but it's there. And then you have to clock this thing correctly. And I'm going to put it about the way that it was when I first started this. And then we're going to test it by starting the bike, and hopefully I did it right the first time. So should be right there. Hopefully that's right. If it's not, we got to start all over. So we're going to put on this cover, and I'm going to check it. I'll probably put a little bit of grease on that cover in a minute, but I'm going to put this cover on to hold it together so I can test the TPS position. So we'll put 2 screws in it. And if it is a little bit high, that'll be okay, because I'm going to show to you what to do about it to fix it. It should be stay together there. So we'll just put 2 screws in here for now. Okay, so I'm going to start the bike, and then I'm going to shut it off real quickly. The goal is to not over rev the bike. We just want to see what it's like. So we're not going to touch anything there right now. So key on, and I'm going to be ready to shut the bike off right away. So I nailed it right away. It's in the right spot. And the spring back is working well. Bring it forward. You can let it go back slowly, and it still goes all the way back. Actually hangs up just a hair there. So I'll keep close eye on that. I might change that later on, put a different spring in it if I choose to. But you know, if you let it go back real slow without the bike vibrating at all, yeah, no, it still works pretty well. So that's that. So I'm going to go ahead and take that cover off, put a little bit of grease on there just to, first out of precaution, and we'll keep going. Make sure you put a lot of pressure on this because you don't want to ruin what we just did if you're going to take it apart and re-grease it. So you take those screws out, put pressure on the black part, the plastic part, then you can pull this piece off like so. Keep putting pressure on the black part, take that ring off. And I'm just going to put a little bit of grease on this ring. So just like that. Again, keep a lot of pressure on that. And then line these tabs up carefully. Like so. Snug these up nicely. It's plastic, so you don't want to over tighten them. Okay. Clean my hands up, and I'm going to get the grease off this because I've found that keeping this dry keeps some dirt getting on it and works out better. So this is just some lacquer thinner to clean things up before I finish putting it together. Now this cap here is on the back side like so. Make sure not to forget this piece. It just goes on like so. It's just a dust cover. No big deal there. Put the throttle on. Slide this back into place. And then I think it's easier to put this on next. You want to find the small hole for this little pin and the large hole for that. Okay, and then it should go together just like that. Then I would start with these black screws here. Give them a good snug, but don't over tighten them. You don't want to break the plastics. And then you have these silver screws, which have the 3-pronged heads on them. And I've just been able to use a small flat blade screwdriver. It works okay. Better to have the appropriate tool though if you have it. You can see they screw in pretty easy. For the bottom one, make sure you put this plate in. And this plate, that's where the zip tie goes for the wire that comes out of the sensor. Okay, should be plenty tight. That still springs back appropriately. That might hang up a little bit. I'm going to be watching for that. If it does, I'm going to put in the spring that has higher tension in it. So I'll be watching for that. When it's running, it shouldn't matter because it's just barely. It still has plenty of tension, but we'll keep a close eye on it. So again, that's what I recommend to you. If you do try this, be very careful with it. Keep a very close eye on it. You're messing with the throttle and its return spring. That can be dangerous. So just be aware that you do need to be careful, and you don't want a stuck throttle on a bike. Also, and then we put in this guard here. Snug, but not too snug. Check it again. Yeah, feels great. And check the throttle one more time, make sure it's not overdoing it. Make sure we're ready to shut it off if we need to. Nice, it's touchy, works good. A little bit of play in there, but that's okay. I don't mind that much play. It's going to be just fine, but that's going to be responsive. It's going to work great. So I hope that helped people out. Maybe you'll try and build your own spring. So like I said, these are the two other iterations. This one was a little bit too loose, and this one was a little bit, I won't call it too tight. I would say it actually worked really, really well. What I was trying to do is just split the difference a little bit between these two, and that's what I got. It springs back appropriate every time, so it's going to be good. Should be pretty safe, but I'll also be careful with it because I know we're modifying it, and definitely recommend caution if you're going to do that, because it's you know, you're modifying the throttle on the bike, and that's can be dangerous if it's not done right. So be careful out there. Anyways, thanks for watching my video. I'll have some other videos coming up here in a little bit, and hopefully you guys enjoy them, and hopefully you enjoyed this one also. Thanks. Oh, and please subscribe.